What's going on, everybody? Today's video is going to be looking at the match between Manchester United and Tottenham Hotspur, coming off Manchester United's big loss against Liverpool. 5-0 was the scoreline last week, and Ole Gunnar Solskjær has 3 games to save his job, starting with this one against Tottenham. And before we start, check out both my books. They're online on Amazon. There's links in the description below. Also, be sure to check out Keyframe. It's how I made this video, and there's links to all that in the description, so be sure to check that out. Now starting with Manchester United with their big tactical switch from their last game versus Liverpool. They went with a back 5 now with 3 central defenders. So in the build-up in their first third of the field, they had Lindelof play on the right, Varane through the center, and Harry Maguire on the left in the central defense. And from here in the first third, we see asymmetry with Lindelof occupying the wide area in more of a full-back position, creating an overload then, with also Aaron Wan-Bissaka playing in a new wing-back position for him, and they create dual width on this right-hand side. Their vertical connection could be seen as inefficient, but Wan-Bissaka and Lindelof don't have the quality to play through the half space, and on the right hand side, it's where Bruno Fernandes likes to drop into more often than not. Then we have a double pivot of Scott McTominay and Fred had more license to go forward, and it really depended on Bruno Fernandes which half space he would drop into, to which player of the 2 holding midfielders would be able to make forward runs. This would typically be a tactic they use to mirror the positioning of Bruno Fernandes through the half space with one of their holding midfielders. So if Bruno Fernandes looked to drop in the half space in this right hand side, Fred would be the player to occupy the half space on the left hand side. Then we see Luke Shaw is on the underloaded side on the left hand side, which suited his qualities, giving him more space and more freedom to go forward, and oftentimes Man U could find him with the mid-range pass. Now looking at Tottenham and a poor performance from them, we have Harry Kane, Son, and Lucas Moura as their front 3. Then behind them, Lo Celso, Skip, and Højbjerg play underneath them in a very spatially oriented 4-3-3, looking to control the center and force United to play through the wide areas. Now Manchester United in the midfield third, when they established possession, we see their asymmetric midfield 3 with a double pivot, creating a 3-2 build-up shape with flexibility from their 2 holding midfielders, then enter the half space. We then have Luke Shaw, who we said plays on the underloaded side in the wide area on the left, and with the 2 forwards Cavani and Ronaldo up front, this gives all 3 central defenders outlets to play direct into and have players who can hold the ball up or look to flick it in behind for runners going off them. But it also gives the wide players an option to create numerical advantage, 2 versus 1s, against the fullbacks of Tottenham, which was often the case. So when Tottenham would press, they would press from out to in. Harry Kane and then Lucas Moura looking to collapse on a wide central defender, with the midfield 3 being drawn to the double pivot and closing down the space. Often when United were most successful, they would release the wide areas through Luke Shaw or a player fanning out, and they would release this player. In this situation, it's Luke Shaw, where then they'd have a fullback arriving late, and then the ability to play between the lines to Cavani dropping deeper or running in behind, or Bruno Fernandes looking to get on the ball in the 10 position. And the space between the lines for Bruno Fernandes or Edison Cavani dropping was very much highlighted by the high positioning of the spatially oriented Tottenham players in the midfield, because they were so drawn to the double pivot, and their lack of staggering in the midfield left them exposed between the lines and didn't allow them to have good access to these dangerous positions. Now this time Varane in possession, going through the half space, creating a lopsided build-up 3 with Harry Maguire going into the wide area and allowing Varane to progress the ball and create diagonal passing options into the half spaces. Now just highlighting the half space here, we see one issue that United still have is they don't use these to their most full potential, and they often vacate the half spaces between the lines other than Bruno Fernandes, who typically looks to occupy the right hand side, but this creates a very underloaded left-sided half space, which then they lose a lot of potential attacks going through this area, with Luke Shaw advancing through the wide area, and then with players like Ronaldo and Cavani looking to play on the shoulder of defenders. It often don't create as many forward positive actions as they potentially can, because they don't have a connecting player in this space, either inverting off the wing or coming deeper to then receive play. Now, a big issue for United in the past is their moments in transition, and now with their back five becoming their new tactic, we can see how this affects players further forward. So we have Cavani dropping deeper, allowing Ronaldo to play a minimal defensive role out of possession. And what the back five did with three central defenders, it looked to create a numerical advantage for most of the game, with a +1 numerical advantage against Harry Kane and Heung-min Son, or Harry Kane and Lo Celso, or Harry Kane and Lucas Moura, depending on who were the two highest players for Tottenham Hotspurs, often through the half space. So these players were marked and closed off through man orientation, allowing then for Varane to remain free. Now what this then allowed the midfielders of Manchester United to do, it allowed them to be more aggressive when they did step. Now, this wasn't aggressive in terms of pressing, but when they applied pressure, it would allow more freedom to the Manchester United midfielders to jump further forward and dispossess the Tottenham players in the midfield third and even in a low block. So we see here Tottenham's typical build-up with two central defenders and two double pivots. So now when United were able to win the ball, they'd have Ronaldo ahead of the ball with Cavani joining late and Bruno Fernandes attacking. And with these three, there's not much pace up front, but it is high quality movement and intelligent play with players who can combine going forward, which is how they scored now their second goal. Tottenham would advance their fullbacks as well, leaving the half space and wide areas open in transition, and with playing a lot of players higher up the field between the lines like Son, Moura, Lo Celso, and Harry Kane, it often left their back line and holding midfielders exposed because of the lack of continuity throughout this team. But from the build-up, Tottenham didn't do anything differently, with two central defenders being split by the goalkeeper, their fullbacks playing as typical fullbacks in line with the holding midfielders, which they played with two of, and in the first third of the field, these players remained in a central position in behind the first line of pressure of Manchester United. Ronaldo and Cavani played on opposite sides. Ronaldo was simply tasked with applying pressure or taking up space around the right-sided central defender. So I was a little surprised Tottenham didn't build through the right-hand side more because of the much less pressure that would be applied by Ronaldo versus Cavani. But then we have Bruno Fernandes as well joining the front three. But typically, Bruno Fernandes played in behind Cavani, taking up one of the holding midfielders, and Cavani taking up the other with his cover shadow. Then one of these two players would typically apply pressure in the first line, but this was the unimpressive part of Manchester United. We still had players arriving late. The distance is way too long for Bruno Fernandes to then apply the first line of Tottenham's build-up. So this distance is way too long to adequately press the ball. And then the other is Wan-Bissaka playing as a wing-back, playing in a more advanced position. Still, the distance is way too long for Wan-Bissaka to go and press, so they can easily get played out of. And if they do this against Manchester City next week, or even Atlanta during the week, or even Atalanta during the week, they will get caught out and they will concede dangerous chances through the holding midfield position. Using cover shadows and then applying a press late is a very bad combination, and they will not have long-term success with this. Now in the midfield third, we see them switch to a 5-3-2, with Ronaldo being the highest player again and controlling the central corridors quite easily against Tottenham. What made it so easy for Manchester United to control the central corridors was because of the build-up tendencies for Tottenham. Now their double pivot became very overextended, with connections being completely separated from their holding midfielders, both of them dropping into the half spaces while leaving Lo Celso as a single player occupying typically the central corridors in this holding midfield position, and even between the lines he does not have many options. So this is a very underloaded part of the field, as we see Lucas Moura creating dual width, and then Harry Kane and Heung-min Son playing higher up the field, but not between the lines where dangerous connections are made and chances are typically created through. So even if Tottenham were able to get the ball into Lo Celso, it'd be very difficult to create meaningful chances going forward because of the lack of options Lo Celso possesses. Also, with the two holding midfielders drifting apart, creates a huge opportunity in transition for Manchester United to hurt them through. Now we see Højbjerg dropping between the two central defenders and creating a little bit better occupation between the lines, but not creating strong connections. So the midfield three of Manchester United pretty much naturally blocked off these connections because of their compactness and the ability now for their back five to play more aggressive and jump into these areas. So with the midfield three using their cover shadows to block access between the lines and then having the support of the back five to then be able to jump and pressure from behind, it made it very difficult for Tottenham to play through these areas. And the full width was created through the fullbacks in deeper area, so the horizontal connections of these players of Manchester United were not tested very much because of the overload between the lines created by Tottenham. So this typically narrowed and heightened compactness and allowed their free players to be their fullbacks in wide positions and in very neutral areas. So now we'll look at one last picture of Tottenham in possession, with Højbjerg now being the player who remains in the central position, with Skip dropping outside the two central defenders. And typically when holding midfielders do this, the fullbacks advance and create width and height through the wide areas, but the fullbacks remained in line with the central midfielders of Tottenham and didn't create much height within the team. So although they were able to obtain possession, they weren't able to create anything dangerous or get into dangerous areas with the ball, which then just left them circulating possession at best. But here we then have Lo Celso, Lucas Moura, and Harry Kane dropping between the lines in each of the central corridors, with Heung-min Son looking to run in behind and off of these players, looking to get Harry Kane on the ball to then find Son running in behind in the blind side of the Manchester United defenders. But when we look at the compactness of Manchester United, allowing Tottenham to play through their fullbacks in the wide area made it very comfortable for Manchester United and then their wingbacks to go and press because they had so much cover from their other four defenders across the field. So playing through these wide areas and deep positions made it very comfortable for Manchester United, and the midfield three weren't manipulated very much through different movements or rotations or positional interchanges between these front three, as well as a discoordinated staggering of the holding midfielders made it very easy for Man U and very hard for Tottenham. So that's how the score ended up becoming 3-0 in favor of Manchester United, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.